Hello and welcome to a special edition of Battlecry. I'm Gaurav Sawant. Prachand. It means fierce or intense. And that's exactly what India's new light combat helicopter promises to be. A fierce weapon of war. A weapon that the Indian Armed Forces wanted for decades and cried tears of blood, missing it in war. The Kargil War of 1999. I want to take you back to the summer of 1999 when Pakistan Army intruded on the Kargil heights. I was then in Dras covering that Kargil war when on the 28th of May, a sad news came in. An Indian Air Force Mi-17 transport helicopter that was being used to fire rockets on enemy fortifications on Tololing had been shot down by the Pakistan Army using surface-to-air missiles. On that sad day, the nation lost squad leader Rajiv Pundi, Flight Lieutenant Subramaniam Mulyan. Both were piloting that transport helicopter. They were firing rockets at the Pakistani defenses. Sergeant Lead PVN Prachand and Sergeant Raj Kishore Sahu. They were targeting the heavily fortified Pakistani sangars and bunkers and fortifications at Tololing. The Pakistanis fired surface-to-air missiles, bringing down the chopper, killing the aircrew and the pilots. That time, if the Indian Air Force had a light combat helicopter or a helicopter that could fly in those altitudes at 15,000 and 16,000 feet, at a standoff distance perhaps of 6 kilometers to 8 kilometers, fired a missile at the Pakistani sangars and fortifications, these lives would have been saved. The Mi-25s or the Mi-35 helicopters made by the Soviet Union that the Indian Air Force was flying at that point of time were very good for desert operations, but not for high altitude. They couldn't cross Zojila. They couldn't fly above 11,000 feet altitude. And that is when the Indian Air Force decided they will have their own light combat helicopters made for India and made in India for Indian conditions. An attack helicopter that could be used in the deserts of Rajasthan, and it could still be used at 16,000 and 17,000 feet altitudes, whether it's Kargil or Eastern Ladakh or the Siachen Glacier or in India's northeast. So let me now tell you a little more about the Prachand light combat helicopter. This twin-engine helicopter has been designed and developed by the Hindustan Aeronautics Limited. It's a 5-ton and 8-ton class dedicated combat helicopter. It's the only attack helicopter in the world that can land and take off at an altitude of 5,000 meters. That's more than 16,400 feet altitude, with a considerable load of weapons, with fuel, significantly augmenting the firepower, not just of the Indian Air Force, but also of the Indian Army in high altitude and extreme high altitude battlefields. The Ministry of Defense says so in one of their statements. The helicopter has a combat radius of 500 kilometers. It can go up to a service ceiling of 21,000 feet, which makes it ideal to operate in extreme high altitude battlefields, whether it's the Siachen Glacier, the Kargil Heights, Eastern Ladakh, North Sikkim, or even Arunachal Pradesh. The LCH is armed with a 20mm nose gun. It can fire 70mm rockets. It has an anti-tank guided missile, the Dhruvastra, MBDA's air-to-air missile, which has a maximum interception range of about 6.5 kilometers. Both the Army and the Indian Air Force have already inducted the LCH with limited series production models, 15 of them. That was approved at a cost of about 4,264 crore. 10 went to the Indian Air Force, 5 went to the Indian Army. The Ministry of Defense has now signed 2 contracts with the Hindustan Aeronautics Limited for supply of 156 light combat helicopters, these Prachands. So of the Prachands, now along with training and other associated equipment, so it's a 62,700 crore rupee deal. The first contract is for supply of 66 LCH. That will be for the Indian Air Force. The second contract is for supply of 90 light combat helicopters, and that is for the Indian Army. Is the Prachand light combat helicopter truly a game changer for Indian Armed Forces, especially the Air Force in high altitude? Joining me on this India Today special broadcast is Air Chief Marshal Fali Homi Major, former Chief of the Air Staff, an accomplished helicopter pilot who's flown extensively in high-altitude areas. Sir, welcome on Battlecry. When I met and interviewed you first, you were commanding the Leh base in late 1990s, early 2000s. You have tremendous experience in high-altitude flying. How would you rate Prachand's performance in high-altitude areas, whether it's Kargil, Siachen on one side, eastern Ladakh or the northeast on the other?
Gaurav, the LCH, the Prachand, was basically designed and manufactured to address conflict zones and areas of operations, high altitude areas of operation, like you mentioned, Kargil and our northern sectors, which are, in the altitude range of 15 to 20,000 feet. And from what I've heard about the trials, etc., which have been carried out, and the deployment of this helicopter at those altitudes at Leh and other high altitude advanced landing grounds, it has performed magnificently. I'm not very sure about at what stage the Prachand is in as far as the weapon integration and the many weapons it is supposed to have with it. Otherwise, it is a very well designed helicopter for those altitudes.
Air Chief Marshal Major, the Indian Air Force has those massive Apache helicopters hailed as the flying tanks. The IAF flies those aging Mi-35s. They couldn't operate in high altitude in Kargil in 1999. And now the IAF is flying the Prachands. In your appreciation, the made in India Prachand, how do they compare to the heavier attack helicopters?
The LCH is by its very name, a light combat helicopter, and has been designed, as I said earlier, for mainly for high altitude operations. The Apache, on the other hand, is a more powerful attack helicopter with a greater weapon and payload, and has also been operating in our area of operation for a few years now. However, when you talk of altitudes, I'm not very sure about how efficient, a standalone operation of a Apache would be at high altitudes for, starting the engines, etc., as compared to the LCH. Because to be fair, the Apache was not basically designed for these altitudes. In that respect, I think the LCH scores over it for operations in those high altitude areas. Now, you spoke of the Mi-24, Mi-25, Mi-35. Now, in today's environment, I think they're best left alone to the planes.
Okay, and if we were to talk numbers and orders that have just been placed with HAL, given HAL's track record, in your appreciation, can they keep up with deliveries? Are you concerned about deliveries and spares and maintenance, given what the Air Chief recently said? Of course, that was in connection with the Tejas light combat aircraft. But what is your appreciation, sir?
I would certainly mention here that while placing large orders is fine, the manufacturer should be capable of timelines. The manufacturer should also be capable of supply chain support. And most importantly, while you turn out a helicopter and you put it in squadron service, it needs to be fully prepared and operational for the roles it is designed for. And for that,
yes,
every weapon which has been incorporated or on this helicopter as per the air staff requirements needs to be operational, available, and functional at all times. Otherwise, you can't call it an attack helicopter.
Point, sir. So it's not just the issue of supplies of the helicopters initially, but supply chain management. helicopters, spares, weapons, systems, and that too in diverse battlefields from Siachen and Eastern Ladakh to Sikkim and Arunachal Pradesh. So far, I mean, the number of helicopters that the Indian Air Force flies is inventory management, supply chain management, and coordination with HAL. Is that a cause for concern?
Absolutely. There is no doubt in my mind that HAL will have to gear up and speed up not just production, but everything that they do. Because unless that is done, as I said, delivering an aeroplane is not just enough. The delivered aircraft or the helicopter should be fit for the role for which it was designed and bought and procured. Absolutely. I mean, they have a lot of work ahead of them. There are a lot of changes, perhaps, but that is best known to the to HAL how to do it. But I would say that they definitely need to wake up and speed up their production.
Oh, absolutely, sir. And we are told there are reports that seem to indicate that some foreign countries are extremely interested. They've shown keen interest in the light combat helicopter. Should the manufacturers, given the current scenario, whether it's at LAC or LOC or counter-terror operations, even as we speak, we are told in the hills around Katwa, there's an operation that's underway. Should the manufacturers and Air Force focus on domestic use first, foreign supplies if there are firm orders, or simultaneously look at exports because that gives India a great name and also service the requirements within?
You see, exports and local demands depends totally on the capability of the manufacturer. If he has the capability of meeting both requirements, fine. But otherwise, he should wait for the domestic use of this helicopter, some hours of flying, and as to how well it is serving the country's air force before it goes across to any other air force. Because I mean, you don't want egg on your face if she doesn't perform there.
And the foreign components in the helicopter, there are some reports that say close to 40%, some say close to 50% or thereabouts of foreign components. Can that adversely impact our war fighting capabilities? I want to take you back in history, when the Sea King and Sea Harrier fleets had to be grounded post-Pokhran because of restrictions. Of course, we've had a great equation with France. That hasn't been a problem. But with the Safran engine and components, could that be an issue?
Till such time we develop our own capability within the country for engine manufacture and the kinds of engines that we want, you will perforce be dependent on imports. Now, that depends on how well we handle the diplomatic scene to maintain, a seamless supply chain, etc., from these countries. But the sooner we start thinking on the lines of designing and manufacturing the aero engines which are required for your helicopters, the transport aircraft, the fighters, or whatever it is, the better it would be for the country. Because you cannot, given the present world order, it would be very difficult to predict whether you can rely on any other country for your requirements within.
Air Chief Marshal Fali Homi Major, as always, for joining me here on Battlecry. Many thanks, sir. I now want to bring into this discussion Wing Commander Unni Pillai. He's former test pilot and former executive director of Prachand and Rotary Wing at the Hindustan Aeronautics Limited. He's flown the Prachand extensively. He's extremely excited about the orders that have been placed by the Narendra Modi government with HAL for LCH Prachand. Sir, welcome. As a test pilot who's flown the Prachand over years, and in your appreciation, what makes Prachand a game changer for India, for Indian Air Force and the Army?
You see, like I told you now, a helicopter, attack helicopter in high altitude is like a guerrilla fighter. Okay, you can go in fight. You have, but it's not like planes where you have no place to hide. Here you have enough hills, ridges, where you can hide. You have the capability to hover behind them, to poof off missiles, disappear, all. So, and uh, used in conjunction with, say, Dhruv, which is also capable, Dhruv and Mi-17, with a very small amount of soldiers, you can deploy them so beautifully across the hills because it's truly a game changer. With a small amount, a small battalion of men, you can effectively control a very large area. And LCH is, designed, is born for that area only. You see, we'll have to, I mean, it's limited to your imagination how you can use it. I'm sure it's going to be a great hit in that place, in the altitude. And that will be our main battle will be fought in case we have a war.
It's brilliant. You sound very gung-ho about the Prachand light combat helicopter, but as someone who's flown the Prachand in the desert, as someone who's flown it in extreme high altitude, is it fit for war as on date? Weaponized?
Yes, it has been fit for war for a very long time. And we were all waiting for the orders to come through. Unfortunately, it took quite some time before the full production order of 156 or whatever, which has recently come through. We had been waiting for nearly 5-6 years for this. And it has always been ready from that time itself. So it's a great news. It's not only great news for HAL, it's a great news for the entire aviation ecosystem. You must understand that because from this order flows a whole lot of orders to vendors and, who will be working on that. So entire ecosystem benefits from this massive order.
Okay. So, you've called it a fit machine for guerrilla warfare. So as a guerrilla warrior, is it in a position to help our soldiers, let's say in an anti-terror operation in the forested area of Jammu and Kashmir? Can it fire at terrorists who may be hiding in a dhok? Can it fire and destroy a well-protected bunker or a sangar from a standoff distance of, let's say, 5 or 6 kilometers away? Are its missiles able to carry out that precision attack at a small target?
Yes, it can. Depending on the missile which is fitted, you can put it through a window. So precise are the missiles, so beautifully you can control them depending on what you have on board. And they are so precise that nobody can escape from them. And you can stand off as much as 7-8 kilometers, far from anything they can fire at you. So those are the advantages. So used sensibly, an attack helicopter is a very great asset in the hills. Okay, so this is one thing. So we are today, we have a weapon platform which can be used over the entire Himalayas, starting from Leh, Ladakh, all the way to Arunachal Pradesh. Whereas enemy would not have anything so effective,
Okay. So, Wing Commander Pillai, there's an apprehension that has been expressed about, can HAL deliver the numbers that are required? 156 in all, 66 for the Indian Air Force, 90 for the Army. Part 2, maintain timelines, ensure there are no slippages, and maintenance of these helicopters, training, maintenance, spares in this diverse and vast battlefield.
No, actually, as far as the rotary wing platforms go, we have always been delivering before time. If you go back for last 6-7 years, I know very well because I was the chief test pilot there. We have always delivered before time. And see, when you get a large number, what happens is you put into motion a whole lot of things. You tell the vendors that each vendor has a lead time. So once a large order is placed, large numbers are in motion, things automatically fall into place. The LRUs, the various parts keep flowing in regularly, and we have all the expertise and, of course, the space. We have a new factory at Kamkul. So all that is going to be utilized. It's not that we'll have to build something now. No, everything is already in its place. So it's just a matter of getting it rolling together.
Okay, so you're dismissing reports of slippages. There's another apprehension that has been raised about a major part of this Shakti engine, the engine of these helicopters made in collaboration with Safran France, from the engine components to electro-optical systems to radar warning systems to jamming components. We are told that close to 40% or 45% or thereabouts are foreign components. Can that adversely impact our war-fighting capabilities should supply chains be impacted?
No, the engines are Shakti, which are made in India. Okay, of course, there will be few parts which are coming from Safran, but I don't see any issue in that because everything will be eventually made in engine division in HAL. So I don't see any problem there.
Okay. So wonderful talking to you and Air Chief Marshal Fali Homi Major on this special broadcast. So the light combat helicopter, made in India helicopter. The Indian Air Force is very confident that this truly could be a game changer. Made for India, made for Indian battle situations, can fly in the desert, can fly at sea level, and can fly in extreme high altitude. How does this perform in real battle scenarios? We will continue to report on that story very closely. But that is all I have for you on this special edition of Battlecry. Many thanks for watching.